really quiet. All right, so let's do a little bit of housekeeping stuff. For those of you trying to read your book and can't find the mysterious chapters 43, 32, so on and so forth, like everything I think past 16, I made some mistakes on your syllabus. Okay, I'm having a banner year already, apparently. The issue is that I was wrong. So, so read the chapters that you have, and I will issue a new syllabus for those of you who are type AAA and would like to have the completely correct one. The problem for me as a professor is I really liked those phantom chapters, so I have to figure out like how I can convey that information to you. I guess this is the Lord's way of saying calm down, because when I was adding those, I have a different text you see that is a little bit different than the one that they send out these instructor review texts, and they have different versions of these texts. So anyhow, when I was looking at it, I thought some of these chapters might be really overkill, but I like them, so I'm going to put them in anyhow. I think this is, you know, the Lord's way of putting his thumb on me and saying, oh no, no you don't. Stay humble and don't kill your students with nonsense. So anyhow, all right, so forgive me for my mistake. So that's one little housekeeping thing. Other thing, on Wednesday I would like you to come to class, but I might be late, and if I'm like, you know, like if I'm more than 5 minutes late, okay, normally you wait 15, all right? But if I'm more than 5 minutes late, you may skedaddle, because I just found out I'm having lunch with the governor. And that's on Wednesday, people! So, and I promise I won't do that in the lunch with the governor. I have to get it out now. I have to get those feelings out now. I don't even know if I'm going to vote for the governor, you see, but he is in charge of helping with certain things that I'm involved with. I'm on a community foundation up in Sharon, and he's supposed to release a whole lot of money for us to do a whole lot of good, and he hasn't. So friends that are more powerful than I have managed to get him to come to lunch on Wednesday, and I was asked to come to the lunch to wheel and deal. So anyhow, I've got to calm down and get that done. So I guarantee you, after like however long it is, like if lunch goes late, I'm not going to be like, I have to teach class now, I'm going to go, because it's the governor, okay? All right, so I love you all, but like I might miss class if lunch goes late, all right? And then even if lunch ends early, I don't know, I might be really hyper and have to do a lot of dancing.
You could come to class and do it.
I could, and you wouldn't learn anything. You'd be like, oh, this would make a great YouTube video, and off with a crazy middle-aged woman, but anyhow, so that's it. I literally just, like, I was typing the email to the provost and president and dean saying, I might miss class on Wednesday because, by the way, I'm I'm typing it and it's like bursting at the seams as I'm typing it, and all of a sudden the fire alarm goes off as I'm typing it. I'm like, okay, again, the Lord is like, stay humble, calm down. So anyhow, haven't calmed down at all. Okay. All right, now you're all hyper too. Okay. All right, so friends, I do want to talk. You like that move? I know. Welcome back. I know.
Schoolgirl, I'm just picturing you being like, hello, sir.
Yeah, you know what? I'm all business. I will be like.
I'm sure you are.
Yeah.
they called it the right person to wheel.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, like as soon as that is over and I'm like a good 100 yards away. Yeah, exactly. There will be lots of immaturity going on. Okay. All right.
I want to know what your kids say when you tell them.
You know what? That's going to be fascinating because they have some very strong opinions about social issues. And
You have to let us know what they say when when you're like, I'm having lunch with him.
You know what, honestly, they're gonna be like, first of all, I can tell you right now how it's going to go. Abby is going to say, well, why am I not invited? That's how it's gonna go. Gabe is going to say, well, will you be at home on time to pick me up from school? That's what Gabe's going to do. And Ben is like, here's my list of things that you need to talk about because I'm a little upset about all of these issues and I think we should do something about it. That's exactly how that's going to go down. All right, friends, so I'm going to try to calm down. I'll tell you who's going to be even more entertaining is my little parents who, like, you know, if I allowed them, they'd probably, like, have a picture of the governor in their home, like, with hearts all over it and stuff, you know. They just are really into their politics. And so that's going to be interesting because they'll probably, I might not tell them right until like the day before, simply because they're going to be too hyper otherwise. Okay, so now the machine's not working. Again, Lord, I get it. I'm trying. I'm trying so hard. Okay, so we're going to go through a PowerPoint today. Let me explain where we're going today. What I want to do in the next two classes, so it might, you know, lead into our next subject a little bit, but I want to give you kind of a framework for how we meet the needs of students specific with reading problems. This is more a policy kind of, I guess the theme is policy today with the governor lunch, but this is more of an understanding of how schools operate with these kinds of issues. So, and the reason why I'm doing this first is because this kind of sets the groundwork. One of the things that we're going to discover is that in an ideal world, we would have a system in place where when students have literacy problems, we could work with them one-on-one, and we could start that work immediately when they are in preschool even, if not earlier. That would be the ideal situation, but we don't live in an ideal world, so we have to think about the systems that we have in place and how they intersect. And so what I hope to do today is to kind of give you an overview of how our response to students with literacy problems has progressed over the years, so that when we find ourselves certainly helping at Hillview School and certainly helping in general in our future roles, whatever they may be, we have an appreciation for why these machinery, if you will, operate the way they do. Doesn't mean you have to accept it. You can like make it better and all of those good things. And if you think it's broken, you can dismantle it and rebuild it in the future. But right now, as novices entering into this system, I want to help you understand how this system is set up to meet the needs of students with literacy issues. And to do that, I'm going to go over a little bit of history and all that good stuff. So, let's see. Are we working now? Yes. So, on here you have this PowerPoint with historical information as the title, not a creative title. So, anyhow, good thing I didn't have to title these things after I found out my news. It would all be gibberish. Okay. And so, we'll talk through this stuff. All right? So, here we go. So, the whole point is for us to understand how this intersects with this, right? And also, if we can appreciate that landscape, it can give us some guiding principles for moving forward. All right. Now, here's the most important guiding principles when it comes to meeting the needs of students who have literacy challenges. The most important thing that we need to understand when it comes to reading problems is that our approach should be to try to prevent the reading problems before they even begin. And when the reading problems start manifesting themselves, we want to ameliorate those reading problems. Ameliorate, you know, you probably know that term, but it's a strong term because it doesn't mean help. It means get rid of, eliminate, okay, cause not to be an issue, right? So that's not the same as saying that we're going to accommodate a child's reading problem, all right? My son, with his visual needs, he's always going to need might be some medical solution that causes his visual needs to not be an issue at all. But when it comes to reading problems, it's not enough for us to say, oh, I'm only going to accommodate that reading problem. We always want the goal of eliminating that reading problem. Now, reading problems don't happen overnight, so fixing them is not a short-term prospect, okay? It's a long-term prospect. But these two guiding principles are what drives us. So when we talk about the very young end of the spectrum, and even in the older end when they start getting into comprehension difficulties and things of that nature, we want to teach and provide services in a way that will make sure that kids don't develop a reading problem if they're at risk for one. And if they have a problem, we want to put services into place to try to eliminate it. Make sense? Okay. Now, that is why in all these policy things, we see the early response and the early intervention issues to be paramount. We've talked about this analogy in your other methods classes. You can think about kids with reading problems as being like two trains that leave the station, right? So if one, let's imagine these are two children at the beginning, and one children enters school with all kinds of rich language experiences. They've been read to at home a lot. Obviously, their phonemic awareness is going to be really good because of all of those factors. So what has happened with these trains before the journey even begins in school? One of them's like a bullet train, and the other one might not have the same power getting started. So we need to try to do things to give this train more power as it moves along, right? The other analogy is that let's say there is an issue in this train, maybe something that is impacting their forward progress. Maybe it's a processing need, maybe it's a memory need, maybe it is a physical need that is impacting their learning, right? So we might start off the same, but quickly this will start happening, all right? Our goal is always trying to close that gap so that we don't have a gulf between what our students' destination is and what their potential is in reaching that destination. Very, very important. The reason why early response is so important is just because of the way language works. Language is this beautiful thing where up until a certain point, we're very flexible and plastic with our language. But what happens over time is we become more and more inflexible with our language. So you should probably already have heard about this through your other coursework, but what do you know about children and their acquisition of language at early ages? What are some things we know about kids and language? Yeah.
Don't really like absorb like 10,000 words or something, a large amount of words.
Huge amount of they are primed in particularly in the earliest years to make all kinds of neural connections and everything so that they can learn vocabulary easier, so that they can learn the sounds of language easier. Okay, so that early time is when language is just really amazing, right? We went to Germany this summer, and our German friends, God bless them, trying to teach me a little bit of German, patient beyond belief, okay? And it's interesting because they would pronounce something to me, and I would say, oh yes, and I would say it back, and I couldn't even hear how awful I sounded saying it back, and they would say no, and they would say it again, and I would say it again, and after a while they would say, okay. And then the kids would say it back to them, and they would look at them and their eyes would light up and they would say, yes, that is it. Why? Well, guess what? Kids, the way that their minds work and the way that they absorb language, there's this time period where it's a lot easier to hear the different sounds in language. Over time, our cultural presuppositions start wearing into that, and our language door closes a little bit, all right? Have you ever noticed people who go to a different country when they are young children? They learn that language very quickly, and also they don't have an accent, all right? And then there's individuals, I was talking to our new Spanish professor today. This man is brilliant. He is so educated and amazing in English and Spanish, and I just wish I could have that duality of understanding language like he does. But he's always going to talk with an accent. And the reason why he's always going to talk with an accent is because he learned English after that door started to close for that plastic nature of language. You get this, right? Like, I can't tell from your faces whether you understand this or not. So, with reading, it is the same. All those little things with phonemic awareness, you are more primed to be more phonemically aware when you are young compared to when you are older. It is a scientific fact that all aspects of language learning are easier to achieve at a younger age than an older age. All right? I could go into a whole big theory on that, but I'm not going to. If you want to find out more about that, look up a guy named Noam Chomsky. All right? And then we have research, a whole ton of research. I could give you study after study after study. But probably the one that I find the most interesting is that around third grade, children that have reading problems, if their reading problems persist, the research indicates that now you have not just a reading problem to deal with, you also have their identity as an academic learner to deal with. By third grade, kids start coming up with this notion of who they are as a student. Right? That is really, really young for a student to decide, am I a good student? Am I a bad student? Am I smart? Am I not smart? Are things easy for me? Are they hard for me? So on and so forth. So if you can ameliorate and prevent before third grade, that's really ideal. Now, is that always the case? We don't live in an ideal world, no. So when you're dealing with the older reading challenge students, you need to understand that you're not just going to deal with their reading challenge. You're also going to have to work very hard on their perception of themselves as a learner. All right? Okay, so those are some important guiding principles. And if we are going to focus on those, we have to really target the core issues. So it's important that when we think about meeting the needs of our challenged readers, diagnosis is incredibly important. And it is not a one-shot deal. It is not, I got the kid's IEP, and these are the achievement scores they have. Really, what do those scores tell you diagnostically? Do they tell you the student's strengths? No, they just are a number, okay? They might tell you their weaknesses, but it is that more ongoing deep thought about, I'm observing my reader, I'm figuring out what are their needs socially and emotionally as they approach this task, what are their cognitive needs, what are their physical needs. All of those things interact to form your opinion of what they need in terms of the response. Okay, so diagnosis is something that you don't cede to the school psychologist. Sure, they'll give you data that will inform your decision, okay, or the school principal, or the PSSA scores, or whatever. Yes, those things can inform you, but you are ultimately the one that diagnoses the needs of your students. So diagnosis is just a huge, huge ongoing thing. And guess what? As soon as you think you have the kid figured out, you will teach them something, and guess what will happen next? You have to diagnose again. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go through the whole battery of all kinds of tests and whatnot. It means you have to have a philosophy as a teacher of I am constantly observing and redirecting and thinking about what you need next. All right? That is very, very different than the philosophy that you have when you're meeting the developmental needs of a whole class. When you are meeting the developmental needs of a whole class, you need to be thinking about where's our standards, are we going there? If someone is not getting there, what do I need to provide to help them to get there? And in general, I have this balance between curriculum and my students, and it's kind of like a 50-50. When it comes to already from your other special ed classes. This shouldn't be like shocking information for you. We talked a little bit about this already. As we uncover what the research says about what's really important, we have to put away our notions of, well, that's the way it's always been done in schools, so I'm going to do that with my reader. And you have to think about, what does the research tell me, and should I be adopting that? So we talked about, is it more important to teach them that this says A and is called the letter A, or is it more important for them to learn that this letter makes the sound A most of the time, and sometimes it makes the sound A, right? So focusing on what's important is really, really key. And that'll be an ongoing theme, and that's why when you look at the syllabus, you might be thinking, well, we covered phonics already, we covered comprehension already. We're getting into this nitty-gritty of what does it mean for the struggling reader, okay? So, and there will be some overlap, but the whole point is so that we can focus specifically on this. All right, and same idea, you've got to understand who your reader is and what the act of reading is for them versus what the reading curriculum is. So I have an example of a young man that I used to teach named Keon, all right? So Keon, beautiful intelligence, wonderful achievement in school, but he needed significant help from me as a reading specialist in order for him to not develop a reading problem. He's a prime example of preventing a reading problem as opposed to ameliorating a reading problem. I worked with Keon when he was in first grade, and the reason why he needed the help of a reading specialist was because Keon had cerebral palsy, and he had extreme physical challenges that made it difficult for him to be able to learn to read. It had nothing to do with his ability to understand phonics and his ability to understand. It had to do with simple things. So, for example, invading your space, I know. This angle for Keon, because of his physical needs, was incredibly challenging. So one slight thing we had to do was make sure that everything he read would be on an angle like this. We also had to make sure that the print was expanded for him so that he wouldn't be challenged visually with trying to navigate and track across the page. Most first graders, when they're learning to read, what do they do when they're learning to read? They track every single word, right? For a child who had fine motor difficulties and gross motor difficulties, we had to think about how to do that differently. And we needed to give him a little window by which he would isolate one line at a time. And I needed to teach him how to train his eyes at the beginning and how to move them across the page as opposed to moving his finger across the page. You see these subtle differences? Keon, with his writing, having the same expectations for him to produce written work would have been completely inappropriate. But at the same time, he did need to learn to write things so that he could make that sound print association better. So simple things like making sure on his elevated desk we had a Velcro strip where he could put his pens and crayons and things like that. And yes, we used a pen and a marker for him because that was easier to glide across the paper than a pencil, right? Do you see how that is so specific to one reader? That is so specific to one reader. And it might seem a little bit daunting to you right now to think about, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to think that deeply about every single reader that I have. But over time, it will become a natural part of your practice if you orient yourself to be thinking about diagnostic work and assessment, all right? That's kind of my goal by the end of the semester, to make you feel comfortable with being able to look at your students like this. An IEP is never going to tell you the depth that you need to be able to understand, okay, this is my reader. It might give you goals, it might give you good accommodations, but it's never going to replace your careful observation. Does that make sense to everybody? And the other thing I might mention is that there's going to be lots of times when you're meeting the needs of readers where you have to network with other professionals. I learned so much from the occupational therapist when I was working with Keon. And I've had grace to know that she had more expertise when it came to training him with his physical needs than I did. And so she suggested that I do something, and if I thought that might not work because how it intersected with what I knew about reading, I didn't say, I don't think that's going to work. I would say, tell me why. Can you explain that to me? And I didn't do it in an abrasive way. I did it in the way of a learner. And by collaborating with those other professionals together, we were able to create a wonderful plan for him. Keon, this was a long time ago. Keon went on to get a full scholarship for a wonderful university. He's a great young man. Okay, so we worked hard to make sure he didn't develop a reading problem. If we had withheld all of those tiny little things, and if he had just even worked with the OT person instead of the reading specialist, he probably would have developed a reading problem, okay? And then, what really was the issue is he had physical needs that could have impacted his reading. So that's that idea of preventing. Is this making sense to everybody? Okay, so guiding principles. Okay, so basically, there are three main approaches to educating students when it comes to reading. And the first one is this developmental approach. This is the regular classroom approach. School districts buy curriculum that fits with that. They hire teachers to deal with that. They have some supplemental things with that. But in general, this is like, this is the super highway. Everybody's on this track, right? But that doesn't work for everyone. And then you move into remedial programs, all right? Remedial programs can be specialized curriculums. They can be specialized services. So for example, the work that we are going to do over at Hillview School is a remedial program, all right? Hillview's fortunate, and we're even more fortunate that they're willing to take us, but they're fortunate that they're going to get a little tiny army of people to help with their remedial reading program, okay? That's good for your students and even better for you, okay? Now, fortunately for them, that remedial program isn't costing them a lot of money, right? Because imagine how much it would cost to hire you all as tutors to do that kind of work. That would be prohibitive, right? But there are some school districts that they put extra resources into this in the form of aides and tutors and reading specialists, things of that nature. That all falls into remedial programs. Sometimes you'll find that the special education curriculum is different than the regular education curriculum. That's an example of a remedial program, all right? Then you get into clinical programs, and these are quite rare. And it's only a few school districts that actually have the resources to do these, okay? These are what I would call specially branded programs. These are programs that have a special publisher behind them. Sometimes the teacher needs to go to special additional training to do this. And in their training, they have to prove that they're competent in the method. And then once they're confident in the method, then they are a certified clinical instructor of that method. The most famous one is Reading Recovery, okay, and I'll talk more about that as an example in another class. But Reading Recovery is a clinical program. The reason why you don't see more, here's the other thing, clinical programs, research indicates that they are the most effective in meeting the needs of students who have reading challenges. Well, then why are we all using clinical programs? Because they cost a ton of money, all right? So 20 years ago, I can remember looking into getting my certification in the clinical reading program of Reading Recovery. I wanted to be a certified reading recovery educator, okay? It would have cost my school district $60,000 for me to be trained, and that was 20 years ago. And also, I would have only been allowed to have a caseload. Reading Recovery mandates that the reading recovery teacher has a caseload of no more than 8 students at a time. Okay, at least that's how it was 20 years ago. I'll have to look it up to see if that's still the case. If you're a school superintendent, okay, I want you to think about, are you going to invest that kind of money, right? That's a lot of money. Okay, and now it would be even more because this was a while back. So it's my personal pet peeve that these clinical programs cost so much money, but here's the good news. Guess what you can do with the internet and a good library access, right? You can find out all there is to know about these clinical programs, all right? And by furthering your own knowledge base, you can still bring that good instruction to your students through your school's remedial program, all right? Make sense? Now, if you find yourself teaching in a school that is blessed to have this, then go for it. Fantastic. Super. Most likely, you're going to work in a school that their focus is here, all right? Don't ignore what's happening in this sphere, because what happens in this sphere usually over time becomes best practice in this sphere. These are the innovators. These are the people that are pushing the envelope. And you need to make sure that what they're doing isn't just a flash in a pan and it actually works, but keep your eye on what's going on there and adopt the best practice for this. Okay? Make sense? All right. Very good. All right. Now, a couple things that you need to be aware of when it comes to remedial and developmental and clinical, for that matter, programs, but especially for remedial programs. A huge problem is that publishers, I know I make publishers sound evil. I'm sure that they're not really as evil as I make them sound. But like, this is a business for them, all right? And so they're in the business of selling stuff. I would like them to be in the business of making sure all children are educated, right? But I think that the process of doing that implies a lot more free stuff, which might impact their business model, all right? So, but anyhow, one thing that you have to be aware of is anytime that somebody says that everything you need to meet the needs of your readers is going to be contained neatly inside this one package. That will never be the case. Oh my gosh, the readers are so diverse. If you could buy it in a box, we would have eliminated, there would be no need for you to take this class, right? So, especially in this there's no app for that, people, okay? Like, nothing replaces this important business of you making these decisions. So you've got to be very, very careful of the box, the only sure thing, and the slick sale. I was invited, I told you this story, I was invited to a school district nearby here, not Grove City, but one nearby, that way. And they were receiving a informational session with a publisher that was promising them that this reading program was going to solve all of their reading problems in the district. Okay, so the school district invited me to come and listen to the presentation. And they didn't tell the salespeople that they had invited a professor with their doctorate in reading to come and listen to the presentation, which made it very entertaining for me. Okay. And I'm sure the poor salespeople wondered what on earth was going on, because they would say this outrageous claim, and literally everybody in the room would look at me sideways. Really? So we broke for lunch, and the principal said to me, okay, so how much of it is BS? And I said, a good bit. And I said, here's the things I see that are strong. Here's the things that I see that are weak. And I didn't tell them what to do. I just gave my opinion. And after that, I left because I figured I had had enough. Okay, and they could make their own decision. There is no one size fits all. Okay, and we in this field of education have this tendency to be like, look at that shiny new thing. I'm going to get that shiny new thing, and it's going to help me. It might help you, but it's not going to solve all your problems. So you've got to be very, very, very careful. I could say also beware of, because we've always done it this way. That's another bullet that should be put up. There's this very popular reading program, and I'm not going to say what it is because it's on your list of things to review, and I'll see if as we are discussing these things, you come up with the own strengths and weaknesses of this one reading program. But it's so super popular, and quite frankly, it sucks, okay? It's like, and school districts buy it all the time. And the reason why they do it is because it's popular, it's been popular, okay? You know, just because everybody else has jumped off the cliff doesn't mean you should too, right? So you have to think about what gets results. That's so important. Every reader is different, okay? You can read that bullet point on your own later. It's just this dead horse I keep beating on individualization and understanding best practice on that individual level. So important. Okay, let's talk about some policies that intersect here. Some of these should be really, really familiar to you, right? Okay, so show me with your, we'll go low level with your fingers. So on a scale of 1 to 5, of 1, I've heard of it, 2, I think I know a little bit about it, 3, I'm in between, 4, I've had this in class, 5, I'm sick of this, okay? Like, well, maybe I'll rephrase that. I feel like you've talked to us in this education program a lot about this issue before, okay? So let's talk about these things. Let's start with Title I. Okay, let me see. Okay, got a mixed bag there. Let's go with IDEA. Okay, good. That's what I was hoping to see. If I saw anything less, I was going to run out of the room screaming. Okay, let's talk about the National Reading Panel. Interesting, you've had some stuff on this, right? You don't want tested today. I get it. No Child Left Behind. Okay, all right, good. And response to intervention. Perfect. Okay, that is what I thought. So I'm going to concentrate on how this stuff intersects instead of necessarily going way back to the beginning and defining all of this stuff. All right. The first one, though, that I do want to talk about is Title I, okay? Because there were some like 2s, 3s, 4s on this one. Okay, Title I is probably the longest running initiative aimed at ameliorating reading problems in the schools. It was designed in the 1960s, part of the war on poverty. I could go into all kinds of history there. But it was the first time that the federal government said, you know what, we recognize that there seems to be a disconnect between children that come from at-risk home situations and children that come from affluent home situations. And if we can do some things in those schools that are serving kids that come from more at-risk situations, maybe we can improve their achievement. Okay, it was the first time that that ever happened. And that money came through something called Title I. It's been relabeled as the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, all right? But a long story short, it is a river of federal money that flows into schools, not just public schools, interestingly, okay? Even private parochial schools benefit from Title I funding, all right? Even now today, okay? So it's a monster, Title I. It's a lot of money, and it shapes a lot of policy. Okay, so I talked about all of this, but there's a couple of things. The federal government doesn't give the districts the money directly. It gives it to the states, and then the states dole it out. That's what that means by block grants. So the Fed says, here, Pennsylvania, here's your big pot of Title I money, and then Pennsylvania doles it out, okay? All kinds of accountability measures set by local education agencies. And it started with something called targeted assistance, right? Meaning that you would target the most needy children in the school to receive the services. Now, that's how it started, and it worked that way for a long time until they realized, you know what? There are some schools where every single kid in this school is at risk because they come from a really challenged socioeconomic situation. So in those schools, they moved to school-wide models, all right? Now, in order to receive federal funding for Title I, let's see how I do with my diagram. Let's take a really big school district, okay? And let's take a rather wealthy school district. So I'm gonna, this is my alma mater, my, K through 12 days, so don't think I'm picking on anyone if you've graduated from here, okay? But not too far from here is a school district called North Allegheny, okay? And do we have NA grads in here? No NA grads? Okay. So like North Allegheny, do you know where it is? Okay. It's an affluent school district. When high school has their own crew team and their own rock climbing wall and their own room of cross country skis in case it snows and you want to go out to do cross country gym class, that's an affluent school district. Okay. All right. So NA, you would think, oh my gosh, they are rolling in it. They don't need any federal money. But what's interesting is the way that the law is set up is that no matter what, let's say North Allegheny has 3 elementary schools and 2 middle schools and 1 high school. One of each type of school gets targeted for some of the federal Title I money, okay? So even in a school district like North Allegheny that has a ton of affluence, there's going to be 1 Title I school at the elementary level that gets federal money. There's going to be 1 middle school, right? And the high school's going to get some. Interestingly, the bulk of the money is going to go to the elementary. Why? Okay? Yes.
Because it's most important to get it there.
Yes. Okay, because of the guiding principles that we talked about earlier. Okay? Yes?
I have a question about it. So, what about kids who, like, your elementary school is decided by where you live?
Exactly. This is interesting. My sister moved to a school district in Pennsylvania last year. She's moved again to South Korea. They move all the time. She's in the military. I'm dealing with that. Anyhow, but in her situation, her son has some reading issues. My little nephew, I love him so much. Okay, and when they did the intake for registration, even though she lived in a certain part of the district, he was sent to another elementary school because they had more Title I resources for him. Okay, so sometimes schools deal with it that way. Most of the time, though, this is more rare. So the school district that I worked in, and I'll answer your question in a moment. The school district I worked in, okay, let's say there were 3 elementary schools and 2 middle schools. Because of the amount of poverty in the district, guess how many schools got Title I money in here? Every single one. Okay, so in that case, it didn't matter where you were going to go.
What, they both have the same amount of money from the government?
No.
Okay.
These guys get far less money.
Okay.
Okay, and it all is a calculated formula based on. I'm not an economic person, so I don't care. I care.
So it's how the school district decides to disperse those funds to reach the kids.
It's more of how the state defines what the poverty thresholds are.
But I mean, like with the buildings it goes to, the district decides that?
I'll get to that. Yeah, well, no, it depends. They have to discuss it with the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do they determine that? Like how many kids basically get free or reduced lunch?
Yes,
That's how they do
that's
it?
exactly how they determine it. The number of students that get free and reduced lunch is what they determine the poverty levels at.
Wouldn't there then be discrimination against, or like, oh, you go to Carson because you're, like.
Oh, when you're thinking about my nephew, like, are you thinking about
Yeah,
being
well,
like,
like,
oh, you went to the dumb school or
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I haven't seen. I will say that for me, the discrimination I see more based on poverty as opposed to what federal assistance they're getting. So for instance, in the district that I worked in, every school was poor. Every school served a poor population. Okay, but there was one elementary school that was in a more challenged area than ours. And I always thought it was ridiculous how people would be like, well, we teach like blah, 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 and they teach over there, and that one is the one that really has all of the issues. Okay, we all had issues, so I see it more based on poverty as opposed to federal aid. Okay, these are good questions. Okay, now, the long and short of this is that one thing that you need to understand understand is Title I funds are everywhere, right? Does that make sense? And I mentioned private and parochial schools. They, based on their poverty issues, get financing for Title I too, okay? And so with that, what that means, have you ever wondered why do all these schools care about No Child Left Behind? Have you ever wondered that? Have you ever thought, why do these really wealthy school districts care about No Child Left Behind? They don't need the federal money anyhow. Well, because the federal money comes into every school district, they all have become rather dependent on it. And that's why No Child Left Behind means something, because No Child Left Behind now has indications of if you don't make progress, you get cuts in your federal Title I funding. See how those are interconnected? Fascinating stuff, right? It very rarely happens. It's been my vast experience that you really, really, really have to be failing children miserably for them to cut off your Title I funds. But it is one accountability measure that's associated with No Child Left Behind. Right? Fascinating stuff. Okay, so I'm out of time, all right? But I want to just say this before we go, all right? One of the things that, in this, we need to talk about school-wide and targeted assistance. Remind me that we need to start here. But one of the things that happens with this meeting the needs of readers is that this implies more than just kids who have IEPs, right? This is meeting the needs of any reader that is at risk. So in this class, I'm not always going to be talking about kids that are identified as special ed, because our response to reading in this framework means those students that may be thought to be, those students that may be at risk. If you ignore this population and you just focus on this, I guarantee you this population is going to get a whole lot bigger, just because the nature of literacy learning. If you can do things to meet the needs of these two populations, you might be actually